Guys, busy earnings week. We're Friday. We had a bunch of earnings already out. Overall, I think it was a pretty positive earnings week. You had a bunch of beats. You had a couple of disappointments, but generally, I think it was pretty good. But the market sold off nonetheless yesterday, the last day of October. Uh, What's the reason of the sell-off despite solid earnings? Is it the US elections waiting on the earnings? Dimitri, you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't think it was the elections because nothing was said yesterday of substance from the two candidates for to cause a sell-off. I think it was earnings related, but not of the numbers, but of the outlook. Microsoft came out a bit conservative, the same as Meta, and the spending with AI going forward, and the growth might not be there to support the huge spending they're doing on AI. And the market is especially from those companies, the market expecting perfection. And when it doesn't get it, then selling causing more selling. And we got the day we got yesterday. I guess it was like Halloween, so it had to be like for the market to give us like a
Little
moment of,
scare.
yeah, a moment of scare.
That's fair. For me, it was interesting because there was a couple of sort of like if you look at the whole story, right? It was the geopolitics aspect of it. I think Iran threatened. I think it was the Iran-Iraq sort of tensions are starting. Apparently, it was something I read yesterday. So apparently, the tensions are starting to grow a little bit, sort of more drastic, and also the fact that it was the end of the month, so you get the big hedge funds rebalancing.
Hmm.
And then you had also, like you said, I agree with you in terms of the earnings. Definitely the earnings were good, but the market seems right now to be in such a euphoric state that if we're
Mhm.
not beating by insane numbers, the market just freaks out. But then
You're
we bounce
making
right back.
you're making a fantastic point, Nestor, actually. We had the example with AMD yesterday. AMD, solid earnings, high growth rates, they beat the estimates, they have a great outlook. But anyway, the stock sold off like -8, -9%
Hmm.
on the day yesterday. How do you explain this? Is it because Wall Street expects at this point, given the high valuations now, the stocks to just absolutely smash the earnings? Is that what's necessary to keep the market going in the next quarters?
Like I think right now is everything related to AI because everybody's it's like every single day you look at the markets, you look at the news, everybody's looking at AI, AI, AI. So I think we're very burnt out and we're expecting just this all of a sudden company should be worth $10 trillion. And it's when you look at the fundamentals and you look at, for example, like PE ratios, we're already pricing in such growth in these companies that we are creating
Mhm.
sort of like this mental constraint in our brains when all of a sudden we're not growing 100, 200, 300% year on year. But how much can you grow every year, right? So for example, AMD is interesting because it's like they can only produce so many chips. They still have issues in their supply chain, right? So all of a sudden they're selling everything that's coming out. I don't even think the chip like cools off before it's being sold to a company that's already buying it, right? But we're seeing supply constraints in this, right? So they're selling everything they can, but because they're not ramping up supply fast enough for the markets, because they think, oh yeah, you just turn on a machine, when in reality it takes years for a machine to set up, like to be set up for all of this like little things within the supply chain that will allow for this to all of a sudden start ramping up. So I see the AI story coming in way later. It's like it's going to take years for these companies to start building the infrastructure in order to create supply, start selling, start installing, creating enough energy for the supply chain to actually be able to run. So you have all of these different things and all of these stages. Everybody's thinking we're going to get there tomorrow, when in reality, it's going to take years to play out. At
It's
least for
going,
the
it's going,
AMD case.
I
it's
tend
good.
to agree, Nestor, because AI is something that's driving the market. It's like during COVID, you had those work from home companies like Zoom, PayPal at the time, and you thought they're going to continue grow forever. But that situation was different because it had a finite life. You're not gonna be locked up in your home forever. But AI, even though the expectations are high and the market is punishing the stocks that they are not meeting expectations, but look at Google, look at Amazon, that they meet expectations and the market push their price 7%. I don't recall the number, but I mean, they give them benefit to the AI because it's a solid business. I mean, you're going to have benefits in the future, productivity for employees. So it's something tangible. And the fact that the big companies like Dimitris said that they are spending money, it makes sense because if they don't spend money and they fall behind the yield, the curve of innovation, then they're not going to be the next Amazon. They are not going to be the next Google. They have to invest to keep their momentum and their position.
Yeah, but would you say that the market has been unreasonable because they expect those big companies to spend big money, but they also want them to have to continue the growth that drive the market in the last year to continue, and they take no prisoners. When they see Microsoft that the cloud might slow down a little bit, bam, 6%. 6% for Microsoft is like a huge. It's ridiculous.
It's billions and billions of dollars,
Yes,
right? That are just
yes.
burned like that. And actually, it's quite interesting when you see who is the best performer of this earnings week. It's not Alphabet, it's not Amazon, it's not SoFi, it's not, despite their solid earnings, it's a complete underdog that no one was expecting. It's Reddit. Reddit went to an IPO a few months ago. It was, it's kind of a meme stock, but differently from all the other meme stocks, it actually has, a growth and some kind of fundamental value. There's a real business there behind Reddit, but it's not. You wouldn't expect the surprise in these earnings, in this AI theme, to be Reddit. And Reddit absolutely smashed earnings, absolutely smashed expectations. Is even earnings positive, has turned profitable. No one expected this. So is this market now not for the underdogs? Shouldn't you try to aim on the underdogs? The expectations are just too high on the Mag 7 and the other big stocks. Is maybe a rotation happening here on stocks that not many people have expectations on? What do you guys think for the next quarters?
I think the story for the Mag 7 continues. We're just seeing that sort of volatility because right now the variance in stocks is massive, right? So we're seeing major moves, right? Like we said, right? A company like Amazon or even Microsoft moving 6%, it's so much money just being created out of thin air or just disappearing out of the economy. It's kind of unbelievable to think, right? But all of a sudden you see companies like Reddit. If we look real quickly, what's the Reddit market cap, right? Like Reddit's market cap right now is sitting at 18 billion, right? When in reality,
it's up 36% in 5 days. So it added 6 billion to its market cap in just a couple of days. Those 6 billion are probably the ones from Microsoft.
True. And that's where the numbers get crazy. All of a sudden, for example, when you see Nvidia move like 5-6%, you're seeing a company that's $3 trillion. That's how many billions? It's like let me calculate that real quick.
That's 100 billions. That's 100 billions. 5% out of 2 trillion. That's 100 billion that move. That's like 5 Reddits.
Yeah. So it's like that's where you see it's like not a lot of money has to go into this stocks. All of a sudden they become sort of like the market likes to have this sort of like what's that called? The zooming lens. What's that name? It's the market. Man. La lupa, tío. Joder.
Someone help me. La lupa. That's a zooming lens. I think you just say zooming lens.
It's a zooming lens. Yeah, I think so, right? So it's like the zooming lens is interesting because the market likes to all of a sudden move that zooming lens to, okay, what's the next beautiful thing in the markets, right? Where am I going to be paying attention? And all of a sudden everybody starts paying attention to Reddit. But the reality is, can they continue? Can we see this like quarter over quarter growth of 33% of a stock that just came out into the markets? That's where a lot of people buy at the high end of the, but you know that saying, buy high, sell low. A lot of people tend to do that when it comes to like brand new stocks that are in the market.
Given the earnings we had, I want to hear everyone's pick, something that impressed you this week. It can also be a theme. It doesn't have to be a specific stock. It can also be a theme that basically your main takeaway from this earnings week for you. Maybe we can start, Adamos. You
Adamos,
have
yeah. I want to hear
you have a
Adamos.
darling, a stock
Okay.
darling, or a theme?
Kim, I think the biggest takeaway from earnings is similar to previous earnings, which is volatility. I mean, you see the markets move a lot without a real purpose. Like Microsoft, they had a 33% growth in Azure. They projected 31 to 32. And all of a sudden, the stock price went down. Then you have PayPal, which again went down because the Braintree decelerated, Braintree growth. But if you look into the numbers, I mean, and you understand why Braintree is decelerating, because they are doing conversations with their customers, and instead of wanting the 90% of the processed volume, they want 75%, but more profitable. So you see the margins growing. You see that where the company is heading. But I think the market overall it's very short-termism. I mean, with a small unsurprise, you get a huge ups and downs. And I think that's a benefit for retail investors like ourselves, that we have the opportunity. We don't have to rebalance. We don't have that you need to rebalance at the end of the month. We have this opportunity and take the advantage of that volatility and direct our position accordingly. So my biggest takeaway is again volatility. And my biggest takeaway is don't just look on the after hours fall or increase of the stock price. Look on the fundamentals because they might not make sense.
Yeah, actually read the earnings report, and if the fundamentals are still good, but the price dropped, you buy more, right? That's essentially what you're saying, Adamos. All right, thanks. Thank you. Thank you for your takeaway. Dimitri, do you want to go next? What's your key takeaway of this earnings week?
So the Mac 7, even though it wasn't just this week, it was like last week as well. So the Mac 7 performed as the market expected. I'm talking about earnings. And it shows that those 7 stocks that they've been carrying the market for so long now still have some juice in them to further carry the market up. Of course, Nvidia hasn't reported yet, and we might get a surprise there. But if you say, okay, all the big AI spending from these companies, they all buy from Nvidia, you're assuming Nvidia is going to do well. How well, that's a question, but I'm impressed because I expected 1 or 2 of the Mac 7 not to perform well and to somehow get the justified sell-off. Because yesterday it wasn't justified. Yesterday was just the market being unreasonable.
You kind of had it with Apple, so there was no real sell-off in Apple, but the earnings were also somewhat disappointing. No, not a real growth
That
there.
was China, though.
They sell the same number of iPhones. Yeah, the reason is China, but you had that disappointment there probably in Apple, right? From the Mac 7, probably is the one with the most disappointing one, I would say.
Yeah, but Apple from all the companies is not the one that performing like, and I think Apple beat top and bottom lines or barely made them. I think
Barely beat, yeah, barely
barely
beat,
beat.
but the
So
expectations were not very high neither, right?
yeah, but though I think for Apple was somehow somehow expected because of China, because China is not doing well. But they all performed like even Tesla. I mean, Tesla did improve their margins from 15 to 19. So that's a big difference, like in a quarter. And despite missing the numbers on the car deliveries, so The seven stocks that carried the market up 20% year to date delivered on earnings, and we're waiting on Nvidia. So I was somehow relieved because one big miss of those, and then the whole thing is a house of cards. Okay. So yeah, I was pleased and impressed at the same time with the Max 7 delivering good results.
So bottom line for you, Dimitri, Mag 7 team is still alive.
Yes.
Nestor.
For me, it's like I would say like, well, I had three things in my head, but in reality, it's like it all relates to sort of one thing, right? And it's what the election sort of fears and how the market is preparing for the election and the impacts it has had, so far. Like an interesting fact that it was actually the data today, the jobs data that came out, the non-farm payrolls. That one, I don't know. It started me in this sort of like research trend of starting to figure out, okay, like when do we usually see a recession when all of a sudden we started seeing the non-farm payrolls coming to the negatives, And the only thing that kept the non-farm payrolls from going negative today was actually the election. The hiring of the election. Government jobs was up by 40K, but I think the final number was like 12K.
Yes.
So that one that kind of blew my mind and it freaked me out right now. And it feels that the market is sort of heading back into, good news is bad news and bad news is good news sort of thing, because all of a sudden the jobs data was not good, but the market is rallying today. So we're seeing that there's definitely, positive coming from yesterday. I think we're seeing maybe the big hedge funds rebuy back into the stock market and people buying the dip. But what happens after the election when all of those jobs go away? Because how many people got hired for the polling for the polling places? How many people are going to be, losing their jobs after the election, at least from government jobs? And then a lot of people are still firing, because interestingly enough, you said that Tesla had a really good margins increase, but that was because they fired a ton of people, So it's like all of a sudden we are seeing that, like, yeah, companies are getting better earnings per share, but I've seen a lot of companies miss on their revenues. And that also has me a little bit freaking out. The fact that like we're still not fully growing.
One thing about the 12K jobs today versus 100,000, which was estimates, they say that it's caused from the hurricane. The hiring wasn't as much because of the hurricane.
Yes.
So that's the story right there. So we don't know exactly what was with the jobs. So
it's just, I've been seeing very little, like white, like yellow alarm here, yellow alarm there, all of a sudden yellow alarm here. And it's like, I don't expect the Max 7 to like come down because they are at the top of the revenue and they're going to kind of continue to make money. But I do see them getting hurt down the line if the whole base of the economy, the whole foundation of the economy starts crumbling, because they're sitting on top of that pretty.
yeah.
So
It's
bottom
my
line
thoughts,
for you, Nestor, is that from this earnings week, you're starting to see signs that the economy is
I'm starting to see
weakening.
economic data where, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, there are a few reasons why it might be weakening, but all of a sudden, if this continues to get to the other side, we could see major pandemonium right after the election. So
All
it's
right,
interesting.
great. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. That was, I think, very, very informative for our audience. That's our first episode of Market Buzz, and it was a bit about a very busy earnings week. The next episode will probably be about the new US president. We don't know yet who she or he is, but there will be a lot to unwrap there as well. Thanks.